Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, what a challenge that last member laid down, that this is one of National's last budgets. Somehow, judging by the response from the people of Rangitata, I think not. In fact, I'd have to say that the response I've had, and I'm happy to detail it during the course of the next few minutes, has been quite overwhelmingly positive. Not hurrah sort of stuff, and nor would we want that, when in fact we are just making our way out of a recession, but nevertheless a quiet confidence that this government at least knows where they're going. So how's the budget gone down with the people of the Rangitata electorate? Well, it's almost 4 weeks now, and I can say, well, the dust is settling, and I say that because, let's face it, when New Zealanders are looking for inspiration that this is the place to stay, that they shouldn't pack their bags and put a container on the pavement and pack their belongings into it to take them away overseas, then they do look to budgets for that inspiration. This budget was certainly about we see the way out of this particular mess, largely left to us by the stewardship of the previous government. And so across New Zealand, New Zealanders are enjoying the knowledge that this government will take hard decisions and will deliver a brighter future for them and their families. Now, in my electorate offices, I've had phone calls and I've had emails. They have been largely positive, but I'm not going to stand up here and say every single one of them is positive, because that would simply be not true. One property owner has raised a concern with me, one property owner, and then even he found that it wasn't as bad as perhaps the rumour mill had suggested to him. I've had one kindergarten teacher express concern to me, and then to counter that, at a meeting I attended, I had a man who's involved in governance of a kindy say, actually, National, you've got the mix about right. And after all, he's in the position to have to determine how his ECE makes its way forward. I've held 2 post-budget breakfasts within the electorate, both in fairly small locations, not in Timaru or Ashburton, not necessarily because, well, basically because nobody asked for them there, but I went to Rakaia and I went to Methven and invited people to join me for breakfast and to talk about the budget and hear more of the detail. It would be fair to say that at budget time, it's all about headlines. The detail comes later. And for many New Zealanders, that detail will arrive in a pay packet or when they talk to their accountant about just exactly how it affects them. Or, of course, they could go to the budget calculator, taxguide.govt.nz. So, speaking of accountancy firms, what do the accountancy firms say? Well, one example, not my own accountant, but an occasional newsletter, as they call it, Footprint from Foots Limited, Chartered Accountants in Timaru. This is their opening line. Budget 2010 was about materially repositioning the tax system to achieve some basic economic goals and chart a new strategic direction for the economy. Got it in one. These guys understand it. Actually, I'd have to say there are some elements about Budget 2010 that could see the income of the accountants, in fact, fall, because there'll certainly be less structuring going on. And then Ashburton accountant Trevor Croy also applauded the budget and stated in the Ashburton Guardian, I quote, "It was expected that the company tax rate would go down to align New Zealand with Australia, but not so quickly. Australia has signalled it will move in the next 2 to 3 years, but we're down to 28 cents from April 1 next year." It was clear that Mr Croy was pleased. But he also stated, with the top personal rate and trust rates now the same, the government has also removed tax avoidance incentive through actions such as family trusts. I couldn't have said it better myself. So what are the other people saying? Well, this is a really good example from the High Country Herald on the 26th of May. One family who will be better off because of Budget 2010 will be the Dalloway family of Timaru. And there's a lovely smiley photo here of Mrs Dalloway with her 3 children. Clive and Dawn Dalloway have 5 children, in fact, and Clive is the sole income earner with an annual salary of $37,000, so not a lot of money. Because of Budget 2010, that family will be about $20 a week better off. And Mrs Dalloway said in the High Country Herald, again I quote, "The extra income is definitely helpful. It's turned out more beneficial for us than I thought." Perhaps Mrs Dalloway had heard some of the scaremongering, some of the headlines that the opposition wished to portray. Mrs Dalloway continued, "I wasn't expecting much change. Overall, I was quite happy with the budget. I think the government has tried to take quite a fair approach across the board with people." That's exactly the sort of approach that our Finance Minister, Bill English, tried to take. So in my electorate, people aren't hung up comparing themselves to the really high tax reductions that some people who earn millions of dollars will get. Because in my electorate there is still a perennial shortage of some skilled people and also professionals like doctors and dentists. So the people of my electorate understand that what keeps highly trained young people in New Zealand isn't always about high pay, but it might be about lower tax. It might be about the mood of the nation. It might be about feeling valued, actually, feeling that these are the very people that shouldn't be slammed and taxed till the cows come home. These are the people we want to stay here. What is the mood of this nation since the Honourable Bill English read his Budget 2010 speech? The mood is lighter. The mood is positive. Because there is a recognition that this John Key-led government has a plan that involves a brighter future for those who work desperately hard to get ahead. Unfortunately, what we are continuing to see from the opposition parties is an endless scramble to try and grab a headline that tells a story about cuts. So often those stories lack basic facts and accuracy. I'm sure you'll get my gist. So some of the finer points of this particular budget, Budget 2010. Well, it is the biggest reform of the tax system in the last 25 years. It's about keeping those skilled people in New Zealand and giving families like the Dalloways the opportunity to get ahead. A really exciting statistic that I'm sure everyone's heard a few times, and I'm going to say it again, because 73.5% of Kiwis will pay no more than 17.5% income tax. Why wouldn't you say yes to some overtime, that being the case? Why wouldn't you accept a promotion? Of course you would. But there's more than just the tax changes. There is, in fact, $512 million going into health. So every time you hear about cuts, think again. $5 million extra for South Canterbury District Health Board, $50 million extra for Canterbury District Health Board, and this is what the Chief Executive of South Canterbury DHB said. The South Canterbury DHB is thankful for the increase in funding announced in the budget. This money, along with an estimated $1.4 million in efficiencies already planned for next year, will ensure that we can continue to provide a high level of service to the community. Despite difficult times, we're pleased that this funding has left us in a position of not needing to consider any reductions in health and disability services for financial reasons within South Canterbury over the coming year. I wish I could read that statement out every time we hear the Honourable Ruth Dyson parroting on about cuts that are not happening in South Canterbury. More money into education, more money into targeting, getting those young people who are not in ECE into ECE. A flat line of involvement in ECE is not okay. There are kids that arrive at primary school and they haven't been to early childhood education. That is not okay. That's the tough end of the bargain. That's not the easy stuff that the former Labour government knocked off. That's the tough end, and that's the end of $91 million that we will certainly be addressing. Lastly, I want to touch on the good news for our older citizens. That is superannuation. In fact, superannuation will be fully and permanently compensated for the increase in GST from 1 October 2010, and our older New Zealanders are coming to realise that now.